Good afternoon and welcome to the webinar to present the memo entitled Market Basket Analysis when Procuring Program Goods and Modifying the Contracted For Product List, published on January the 17th, 2018. I'm Sandra Foss, a Program Analyst with Food and Nutrition Services Child Nutrition Program. I am joined today by Tom Patrick from the Virginia Department of Education School Nutrition Program, who will be co-presenting with me. Also, Courtney Howder of the Child Nutrition Programs and Kylie Larson of Food Distribution Programs will be joining us at the end of the webinar to address any questions concerning market basket analysis. Together, over the next hour, we hope to provide an overview of the market basket analysis and then review the questions and answers portion of the guidance. Before we begin, we want to ask you to please use the chat box to input any questions you have related to the content of this webinar. We will be reviewing questions submitted specifically on the market basket guidance during the webinar, and will address any questions raised at the end of the webinar. So let's get started. For goods used in child nutrition programs. The memo also addresses the addition of goods after a contract has been awarded. The memo applies to all program operators operating the National School Lunch Program, School Breakfast Program, Summer Food Service Program, Child and Adult Care Food Program, and/or Food Distribution Programs. We will use the term program operator or operators throughout the webinar to refer to this group collectively. This guidance was developed with the help of a work group consisting of state agencies, School Nutrition Association, and industry partners. We would like to thank Tom Patrick for his participation in both the work group and this webinar. The work group members provided perspective on current market conditions where this method of contract evaluation is common. They also provided information so F&S could consider how program operators using this method can do so while still complying with federal procurement standards and maximizing full and open competition. In a nutshell, this memo provides guidance on the use of market basket analysis while soliciting for goods used in child nutrition programs, using market basket analysis when procuring processed end products containing USDA foods and which are purchased using the net off invoice value pass-through system, and adding goods once a contractual relationship has been established. The term market basket is used to describe a practice utilized by program operators of awarding contracts based on an evaluation of the lowest price a vendor can offer for a sample of goods. We want to make sure up front that it is clear that this is not a new type of method of procurement. Rather, it is a way of analyzing the prices using a representative sample of goods and using that information when determining contract award. It is used as part of the solicitation process, and when it is to be used, it must be clearly specified in solicitation documents and the resulting contract. For example, this type of cost analysis can be used in a request for proposal or invitation for bid solicitation. Again, it is a way of determining contract award by looking at a representative sample of the goods you are soliciting for. So, using this type of cost analysis in a request for proposal solicitation or an invitation for bid solicitation will still result in a fixed price contract or a cost reimbursable contract. The point is that it is not a new solicitation method nor a new type of contract. Rather, it is a way to analyze the prices received in response to a solicitation in order to award a contract. This process allows program operators to look at a representative sample of goods and award a contract based on that representative sample. We will go into greater depth on this as we progress through the webinar. As already mentioned, if using this type of a cost analysis, such must be specified in written procurement procedures, solicitation documents, and contractual agreements. SNS recommends that this represents at least 75% of the estimated total cost of the contract. That is the contract value. Let's look now at the details of the memo. Program operators must comply with the program and government-wide procurement standards. Evaluating the price on all goods, either as an aggregate, bottom line, or total cost, or by line item, is the preferred method of awarding a contract. However, we recognize price analysis can be simplified, and a valid price analysis can still be achieved when only the bottom line costs of major items are totaled to determine the lowest price between bidders. As always, consistent with 2 CFR 200.320, all contracts must be awarded to responsive and responsible contractors. Price must be the primary factor when evaluating bids and proposals, and contracts must be awarded to the lowest bid or proposal most advantageous to the program. So how must the market basket analysis work? A market basket analysis allows a program operator to review bids using an established representative sample of goods and uses this subset of prices to award a contract. The published solicitation must include language that allows for this type of evaluation. We will look at sample language in a later slide. The market analysis is not acceptable for awarding equipment or service contracts, such as pest control, as service contracts do not lend themselves to this type of analysis. In determining the goods to be used for evaluating an award, the program operator must select a representative sample and include that in its solicitation. Again, SNS recommends the aggregate value be 75% or more of the estimated value of the contract to be awarded. When using a market basket analysis prior to final contract award, the program operator must obtain pricing for the remaining listed goods that were not listed in the market basket analysis. The pricing of these miscellaneous goods must be reasonable. As always, all items on the list of goods to be procured, whether used in the market basket analysis or not, must have clear and accurate descriptions, specifications, and estimated quantities to be used in evaluating responses and awarding the contract. The market basket analysis is permissible when procuring processed end products containing USDA foods purchased using the net-off invoice value pass-through system. Under net-off invoice, processed end products are sold to an eligible distributing or recipient agency as appropriate at a net price that incorporates a discount from the commercial case price for the value of donated food contained in the end product. Net-off invoice is used in many different circumstances, but is often used when a commercial distributor exists in the supply chain between the processor and distributing or recipient agency. Market basket analysis is not appropriate in fee-for-service processing contracts, as these are service contracts and do not lend themselves to this type of analysis.
The market basket memo also addresses adding goods to a contract. This guidance allows program operators to add goods after a contract has been made when, first, the option to add goods is included in the original solicitation and contractual agreement, and second, the total value of all additional goods does not exceed a specified amount of the estimated value of the contract at the beginning of the contract year. In other words, you can add goods to a contract after the contractual agreement has been entered, as long as that is included in your procurement procedures, solicitation documents, and contractual agreements. FNS recommends limiting additional costs to 5 to 10% of the estimated value of the contract. The memo provides flexibility to state agencies in establishing thresholds lower than 10% when adding goods to a contract after a contractual agreement has been entered. The memo also provides sample solicitation and contract language on adding goods to a contract, in addition to specific language on the use of market basket analysis. So you ask, what if I need additional items on an ongoing basis? There are occasions when program operators need to purchase goods not included in its existing contract. For example, a new food is introduced by a supplier that may benefit the program. Such purchases should be made using applicable procurement methods such as micro-purchases, small purchase procedures, sealed bids, or competitive proposals, depending upon the value of the purchase. If it is determined that purchases are needed on an ongoing basis, they may be added to an existing contract if the following conditions are met. First, the option to add goods must be included in the original solicitation and contract. And second, the total value of all additional goods and quantities of listed goods that exceed estimated quantities may not exceed limits specified in solicitation and contract. An example of a specified limit would be a percentage of the estimated value of the contract at the beginning of the contract year. If the value of any additional goods exceeds the specified limit, A separate procurement procedure for those goods must be conducted, or these purchases will be considered an unallowable cost. Again, FNS recommends limiting additional costs to 5 to 10% of the estimated value of the contract. If the contract allows a renewal option and the renewal is included in the contract, then upon renewal, any goods added to the contract must be included in a contract amendment. For each year of a renewed contract, a new basis for contract value, including the actual expenditures of the previous year, plus the value of the additional items, must be established. Likewise, actual expenditures that fall below the initial estimated value of the contract could result in a lower contract value in subsequent contract years. Program operators must maintain records of all additional goods purchased to ensure that the value of additional goods purchased does not exceed the specified limit.
The latter half of the memo looks at questions that might be raised by this guidance. To address these questions, we have posed hypothetical questions and provided response to these. When discussing market basket analysis, these look to, first, reinforce the importance of forecasting and estimating quantities when procuring program goods. Provide guidance that all goods to be procured must be listed in the solicitation. However, some goods might be overlooked at the time the solicitation list of goods is drawn up. Provide sample language surrounding market basket analysis for use in program operators' required written procurement procedures, and outlines documentation the program operator must maintain. Providing guidance on determining a representative sample that may be used for a market basket analysis.
When discussing modifications to a contracted for list of goods, generally the memo provides guidance on, first, sample solicitation and contract language to use when adding goods to a contract. Also, the limit that must be specified when adding goods to a contract. And finally, goods may be added even though not included in a list of all goods to be procured under the contract, as long as the additional goods do not exceed the specified amount of the contract value. The memo also provides guidance on what an addition actually is, and the fact that states establishing a threshold lower than the recommended FNS, which is 5 to 10%. As we've mentioned, FNS recommends limiting additional costs to 5 to 10% of the estimated value of the contract. And then lastly, the memo addresses how to amend the contract to allow for the addition of goods.
Let's look now at some of the specific questions FNS considered. How do I create the list of all goods to be purchased when developing a solicitation? Program operators should have a forecasting plan and process for determining the type and quantity of goods needed. Forecasting is normally based on menus, program participation, and prior orders. Basing procurement on menus and program participation is a best practice, and prior orders and contracts should be used to assist with this forecasting. In addition, suppliers often provide velocity reports to notify program operators of the volume of goods purchased and may contain the number and total value of goods purchased for the prior year or period through a contract award. Thus, a velocity or usage report could be used when developing a list of all goods anticipated for purchase in a solicitation. Best practices would be to include a provision in all solicitations and contract documents that suppliers will provide velocity reports as requested. Forecasting resources include the Institute of Child Nutrition Forecasting the Procurement of Foods, and from FNS, the Menu Planning webpage, the Food Buying Guide, and Procuring Local Foods for Child Nutrition Program resources. Do I need to estimate quantities when using a market basket analysis? The answer is yes. All solicitations, regardless of the process for contract award, must include reasonable estimates of usage for every item to be included in the solicitation. This includes solicitations for processed end products containing USDA foods purchased using any value pass-through system. The estimated usage quantity is essential for evaluation of the contract award. FNS understands there is considerable concern about effective forecasting by program operators, specifically whether they will procure what they forecasted and in the quantities that are included in the solicitation and contract. Forecasted quantities represent an estimate of usage, and actual purchases may be more or less than the estimated quantity. However, the forecasted quantity must be a reasonable expectation of the actual quantity to be purchased, and the program operators should make every effort to purchase the estimated quantities. In the actual quantities purchased, if the actual quantities purchased exceed the estimated quantities listed in the contract, the net increase is subject to the limit on increases in the total contract value for that contract period at the limit that is in the contract. In my solicitation, do I have to list all goods I will procure under the contract, whether or not a market basket evaluation method is used? The answer is yes. However, some goods might be overlooked at the time of the solicitation list of goods is drawn up. Additional goods may be allowed if allowed under the original solicitation and contract. The requirement to list all anticipated goods is in keeping with the requirement that all procurement transactions be conducted in a manner providing full and open competition as required by 2 CFR 200.319A. Likewise, clear and accurate descriptions and estimated quantities are required for all goods and services listed in the solicitation per 2 CFR 200.319C1. Do I need to include written procurement procedures for how I conduct my market basket analysis to award a contract? The answer again is yes. All program operators must use their own documented procurement procedures which conform to federal, state, local, and tribal laws and regulations. All cost analysis procedures must be part of these written procurement procedures, including a market basket analysis if used. If using a market basket analysis, you will include the percentage of the estimated total value to use to determine the representative sample. Program operators can refer to the sample language provided in the memo and on the next slide and modify for their specific needs. Again, F&S recommends a sample size of at least 75% of the value of the contract. This slide shows the sample language that may be adapted and used in your written procurement procedures. I will not read it here, but this sample language can be found in question 4 of the memo. The market basket analysis sample is established to represent, in this case, 75% of the total estimated value of the contract to be awarded. The most recent velocity sales report from our current supplier was used to project the balance of the year and adjusted for any estimated change in menu and participation for the following year. As a result, the list of, in this case, 100 goods to be purchased under the solicitation includes the top 60 goods purchased by dollar volume representing the 75% threshold. Prices for the remaining 40 goods listed in the solicitation should also be included, though they will not be a part of the market basket analysis. You will see in this sample language that the solicitor has chosen to obtain prices for all goods in the solicitation, even though only a representative sample will be used when evaluating for contract award. It is up to the soliciting party to determine if they want to obtain the prices for the remaining goods in response to the solicitation as the sample language shows, or after the vendor has been selected but before the contract has been awarded, which is also consistent with this guidance. The option to ask for pricing of the goods any time before the contract is awarded is in keeping with the intent of the memo, which is to provide flexibility to program operators when procuring goods for the program. How do I determine a representative sample for my market basket analysis? SFSP recommends using a representative sample that reflects, again, 75% or more of the estimated contract value. For example, suppliers often provide velocity reports to notify program operators of the value and volume of goods purchased for the prior year or period through an awarded contract. The program operator's written procurement procedures state they will use a sample representing, in this case, 80% of the value of goods when using the market basket analysis. When looking at the products purchased from the prior school year, the program operator determined that 35 goods represented 80% of the value of total purchases during that year. These 35 goods then become the representative sample for the market basket analysis. Program operators need to consider forecasted changes and usage for the upcoming contract period in determining the representative sample and value of total purchases. It should be noted that the number of goods in the sample will vary depending on purchase needs, purchase price, product quantity, and total contract value. A best practice is to include a provision in the solicitation and contract documents, again, that suppliers will provide velocity reports as requested. What documentation of procurement must I maintain and make available during a procurement review in order to support my evaluation process of price-cost analysis? All procurements must be documented, including those using market basket analysis. This would include related documents and spreadsheets that list prices, costs, and estimated quantities of goods, and any other supporting documentation used for developing and analyzing the market basket. Additional procurement records should include an evaluation matrix used to evaluate bid or proposal costs. Copy of solicitation documents used to award a contract, bid, or proposals that were received, and any communication with potential respondents and any bid or proposal disputes received as a result of the contract award.
Now that we've finished discussing market basket analysis and how it can be used, we'll focus on adding goods when a contractual relationship exists. First question is, am I allowed to add goods to an existing contract? And the answer is yes. However, when adding goods, please follow the memo guidance. The solicitation and contract must contain language that allows goods to be added and must establish limits on the amount that can be added. Again, FNS recommends that the additional costs be limited to 5 to 10% of the estimated contract value. So when additional goods under an existing contract are needed, the addition is limited to a total value established at the beginning of that contract period and at the beginning of renewal years, and must be specified in the solicitation document and resulting contract. In other words, to ensure full and open competition, everyone that is responding to a solicitation must know, because it is stated in the solicitation, that goods can be added, but that there is a limit. It is essential to monitor the contract to ensure that the established limit is not exceeded. So you may be wondering, is there sample solicitation and contract language that I can refer to? And again, the answer is yes. If you refer to question number 7 of the memo, you will see sample language that can be modified to fit your needs and which can be used in procurement procedures, solicitations, and contractual agreements. So what goods should I list in a solicitation and contracts? All foods and supplies necessary for reimbursable and non-program meals and food served in program operations should be listed in the solicitation and ensuing contract. This includes processed end products containing USDA foods purchased using any value pass-through method. All items on the list of goods to be procured must have clear and accurate descriptions, specifications, and estimated quantities to be used in evaluating responses. Please remember that you should receive prices for all goods requested in the solicitation. However, if using market basket analysis, you can use a representative sample to determine who you will procure the requested goods from. So what is considered an addition to the list of goods in a solicitation and contract? Any food or supply that was not part of the original solicitation or contract list is considered an addition. An example would be a new food available for purchase on the market. An occasional approved substitution that a contractor may make to fulfill an order is not considered an added product. So we may wonder, how should I monitor my contracts so they do not exceed the limit the contract allows? Program operators must maintain records of their solicitation, the contract, which includes the list of goods to be purchased, and the list of goods added, including prices and the value of added purchases. The documentation must be available during procurement reviews. Further, program operators must, on a regular basis, analyze the value of the added goods against the total estimated value of the contract established at the beginning of the contract period. This ensures that you do not exceed the limit allowed by the contract. Next, what do I have to do in order to amend a contract in order to include additional goods? For this question concerning added goods, again, what do I have to do? To answer that, program operators may issue an amendment to the contract that incorporates the added goods as part of the ongoing contract list, subject to the limitation on adding goods that is set in the contract. When the option to renew a contract is present in the solicitation and contract, and when the optional renewal is agreed upon by both parties, a new base calculation of the value of the contract is to be established for the purpose of resetting the allowable limit on added goods during the new contract renewal period. In other words, if both parties agree to renew a contract and there have been goods added, then a couple of things need to be in place. First, the contract has to say that goods can be added, and there needs to be a limit on how much can be added. The addition of goods cannot exceed that limit. When it comes time for renewal, those added items or decrease in items will be used to determine a new baseline value. For example, I have a contract that the first year is valued at $151,000 and includes a provision that I can add goods as long as it does not represent a 5% change, which would be $7,550. That year, I added two groups of items that I needed to purchase on an ongoing basis and decided that I wanted to add them to the contract. One group of items cost $7,000, the other group costs $6,500. Upon renewal, I can add those additional goods into my contract, bringing the value of the contract to $158,000. The other group of items, which cost $6,500, I cannot include in the renewed contract because that would have exceeded my 5% change limit.
Now it's your turn. Courtney and Kylie will now join us to share the questions and answers provided during the presentation. We welcome the opportunity to discuss the memo and provide any clarification we can, in addition to hearing your thoughts on the implications of this memo. Please enter your comments and questions into the chat box, and we will address as many as possible as time allows. Courtney and Kylie, welcome.
Thank you, Sandra, and thank you, Tom. We appreciate you. So far, we've received several questions through the chat feature, so we appreciate that and your participation. We begin with a question: does this type of process apply to equipment such as dishwashers and such? And per the memo, and when I say memo, I'm referring to SP 04-2018, FD-144, no, this type of market basket analysis does not apply to contracts for equipment or services. Another question we had is, if the purchase is informal and there is no contract, is this policy memo applicable? The policy memo as it stands applies to formal procurement using formal procurement procedures such as an IFB, invitation for bid, or RFP, request for proposals. Having said that, we are discussing the applicability of this analysis to informal procurement going forward, but as it is right now, this memo applies only to formal procurement. Another question is the 75% pertaining to the 75% of the quantity of line items or of the dollar value of extended line items? It seems as though you are saying it is the latter, 75% of the estimated value of the contract, and that is correct. We have a question: is issuing a purchase order to meet the contract requirement of, is issuing a purchase order to meet the contract requirement of the RFP process? In other words, the step 3 of the process. So just to kind of go over how this would work is that you would forecast your needs, estimate the value, develop a solicitation. In this case, we're using the RFP process, include the use of market basket analysis in the solicitation, and also make sure that it was included in your procurement procedures. You would list all the goods that you want to receive using the RFP, request for proposals, and then in the solicitation, you would specify what percentage you're going to use of the estimated value to award the contract. So we recommend 75% of the estimated value. So let's say that happens to be the top 20 items. You would use the prices for those top 20 items to evaluate the award, but keep in mind that you still have to get the prices before the contract is awarded for all the other goods in the solicitation. This can also be used in an invitation for bid similarly.
Another question we received is NOI the value pass-through allowed? The answer to that question is no. NOI was mentioned in the memo because market basket analysis is most typically used under NOI contracts, but procuring entities could use a market basket analysis with other value pass-through systems such as a refund value pass-through system. But please note that the value does currently state that fee-for-service contracts are not appropriate for the market basket analysis.
A procedural question we had is, will there be copies of this presentation sent out after? Yes, we will email to participants a PDF copy of this webinar. However, slide notes will not be included. After we have had this webinar transcribed with captions, we will make it publicly available and send an announcement out on PartnerWeb. A question we had about the 5 to 10% range is, why did FNS come up with 5 to 10%? Is that defined in any law, statute, or regulation, or is it just a suggestion? Per the memo that we're using, and which is mentioned on each slide for your ease of reference, the 5 to 10% range is a suggestion from FNS. It was reached out in conjunction with a work group that represented several state agencies and industry. We gathered their feedback on a percentage change threshold, and we concur with the 5 to 10% range being that which we are most comfortable with, and which is designed to allow for some flexibility when using formal procurement process. Again, a question about the 5 to 10% limit on adding items to a contract. A state asks, states, the question is, it has been repeated, FNS recommends 5 to 10%. States are going to come across SFAs who go above and beyond this percentage. How are SFAs going to review these SFAs and or handle this? So as we stated in the webinar, it's imperative that this threshold be included in documented procurement procedures, and that when used, it should be included in solicitation documents and contracts, and it should be being used accurately as stated in those documents. A question, what is the advantage of using this procurement method? The work group felt when we were getting their opinion on this matter, that this was a way that when soliciting goods, you don't have to get the prices for all the goods in the beginning. You can use a representative sample and make an award based on that, but noting that you do need to get the price of all goods before the contract is awarded to ensure that those prices are reasonable. Pardon me while I read through the questions. If a group of districts purchase goods as a co-op and each district has its own procurement procedures, when procuring as a co-op, so we include all the procurement procedures for each district or only include the cooperative procurement procedures in the solicitation documents? When the district is being reviewed, the reviewer will look to see that if they're using the market basket analysis, they've included this method in their documented procurement procedures, and that these are included in solicitation, such as invitation for bid and request for proposals, and in the resulting contracts, and that it's used according to how it is stated.
This is Sandra. I might also recommend that the cooperative survey their districts and determine what each district has established as their maximum value, and then the cooperative would use that most restrictive approach, because as in all federal procurement standards, the most restrictive threshold, for instance, applies with small purchase procedures. So in the case of the specified amount, the most restrictive amount would apply. That would be the recommendation that they might consider.
Thank you, Sandra. Another question we had is, do you have available examples of what this looks like? Sample contract, list of items, documents needed. I am a visual person, smiley face. Thank you for the smiley face. In the memo, we have sample language that can be used in the written procurement procedures, and this sample language can be adapted to your needs and is language on the market basket analysis and also sample language for adding goods. Question is the percentage additional add-on per year or contract? So when adding goods, each time the contract is renewed, those additional goods would be combined into value, noting that that should not exceed the threshold established. FNS recommends that be limited to 5 to 10%. John had a question. Can you amend a contract during the contract period to increase the total value in cases of increased participation or adding a program? That's a tricky question and would depend on the circumstances. We always want to avoid material changes to a contract. Material change is a change that if both parties had known about it, or the contracting party had known about it, they would have bid differently, or parties who wanted to contract, if they had known, would have bid differently. So generally, changes to a contract can be made if both parties agree, but again, noting that you want to tread lightly. Some of these questions are very fact-specific, and without more information, it's hard to just give a clear yes or no. How easy is it to piggyback on one of these contracts? We're going to stick to market basket analysis. Adding parties to a contract we've addressed in another memo we issued. Group purchasing efforts, I believe it's SP 38 2017. That might be the Buy American. I'm sorry, I don't have the memo code memorized. But we have addressed that in other places. So another question from John, if the supplier substitutes different products in place of an item in the bid, does this go against the 10% of added goods, or does it exist within the awarded items? So I'll refer specifically to question 9 of the memo that says, an occasional approved substitution a contractor may make to fulfill an order is not considered an added product. And thus that would not go towards the threshold established in your procedures and solicitation and contracts. A question from Vivian, if a contract is already awarded to different manufacturers for different products, can we do an RFP for a distributor using cost-plus method? This distributor will go out to purchase, pick up, and deliver items to LEA. Cost-plus method means a fixed case charge or percentage added to the price of the item, which is included in the awarded manufacturer RFP. This is just a reminder that cost plus a percentage of cost contracts are not allowed and are specifically forbidden under federal law. Please bear with me as I look for some additional questions. Again, a question about whether this market basket analysis is used for procurement of services, and no, the procurement of services does not lend itself to this type of cost analysis. Question, a statement from Barbara. I did not understand the last statement about how much can be added in an amendment. I didn't think there was a limit. When adding goods to a contract, if you're going to have that option, it should be included in the solicitation document and contract, and there should be a limit. FNS recommends change no more than 5 to 10%. Question from Robert, isn't this just a line item bid? We are listing 75% of the items. How is this a market basket? So in this case, you're using a 75% of the estimated value of the contract award. Sorry, let me start over.
May I clarify if the line item is the method of award? Because in a line item award, every individual item is evaluated, and it can be awarded to one contracted party, and another line item award can be awarded to another contracted party. So I do believe if we understand your question correctly, the market basket would not apply in the contract when the line item is the method of award.
Do rules regarding market basket survey apply to catalog bids, i.e. awarding the entire catalog? We are going to skip that. With 2 minutes to go, let me see if I can answer just one more question. Does market basket apply to both formal ISB bid and RFP, request for proposal? Yes, it absolutely does.
May I offer that in the last minute that we have remaining of time, we receive all of these questions, and we will be able to use these questions to inform additional guidance. So we very much appreciate that you have provided this active engagement in providing questions this afternoon. I think we're pretty much out of time. We want to thank you so much for your participation on this presentation today. We hope this has been helpful, and we hope that you will refer back to Memo FD 144 SC04 2018, and if you're with the Summer Program of 2018, or with the Child and Adult Care Food Program, it's 04-2018 as was presented on the slide. Again, we will provide the slides and a transcript of the presentation this afternoon, and it will be announced on PartnerWeb, and we hope to have this information to you in the near future. This ends our presentation this afternoon. Thank you very much, and goodbye.